South Africa will submit a comprehensive dossier to the International Court of Justice today to substantiate its claims of alleged genocide by Israel in Gaza. Following this submission, Israel will then have until the 28th of July next year to file a counter memorial. I'm joined by Professor André Thomashausen, international law professor at the University of South Africa. A very good afternoon to you, Prof. Thanks very much for your time. Just how significant is this move?
Well, it is a very important process, a very important step in the legal process before the International Criminal Court. Everything up to now was like preliminary and on an urgent basis. Now comes the main application. It is probably several hundred pages long, and it has to include evidence. It has to include all the circumstances and the alleged facts and the evidence for it, and of course the legal arguments. And then Israel will get basically half a year to respond to that in July 2025. And then the court will probably take a year or two to make up a finding on the basis of the two submissions.
I mean, will people have faith in this process given the fact that the ICJ did rule, and but that hasn't really stopped, you know, the carnage? People keep on dying, and not only that, I mean, Israel has been going around boasting about the fact that they have been, you know, killing a lot of leaders of Hamas, for example.
Well, and so has Hamas been going around boasting that they have killed 1,200 innocent Israeli civilians and many hostages, and that they're still keeping about 100 hostages hidden somewhere in the tunnels. The essence here is that the ICJ procedure was never designed to deal with such type of emergencies of sudden use of force in international relations. The United Nations Charter makes it the duty of the United Nations Security Council to deal with any threats to peace and security in the world. And the difficulty there is that the United Nations Security Council is controlled by the 5 permanent members, the 5 veto power nations, which are the 5 nuclear arms countries, because the founders of the United Nations, and amongst them South African General Jan Smuts, they thought it would be wise never to take a decision against anybody who has nuclear weapons. So because now the world has fallen apart, and Russia and the United States are also basically in a situation of war, there is no chance for a consensus in the United Nations Security Council. Otherwise, it would be the UN Security Council that would mandate a intervention force, as they did, for instance, in the case of the war between North and South Korea, where incidentally, again, South Africa participated with an active military force that was under blue helmets, operating as a UN intervention force. And ideally, this situation in Gaza should have been stopped by a multinational UN peacekeeping force.
Well, that hasn't happened, and this doesn't look like it's going to happen. And as you point out, the ICJ process is not geared towards this sort of thing that is being asked to do. I mean, Israel will have until July next year to file a counter memorial, and of course that then kicks off our other processes then kick in, which, as you say, are going to take a very long time. Is there any hope that there is anything that can be done right now to stop the deaths we're seeing in the region?
Well, other than a direct military intervention, and South Africa has participated in such initiatives in the north of Mozambique and now in the Congo, with 2 battalions in the Congo, and there might be a number of nations willing to say, we will send our soldiers there to stop the 2 sides from firing missiles at each other, because it is both sides that are daily firing missiles. Otherwise, the ICJ cannot really do much. And even if they could come to a judgment very quickly, make some extraordinary exception and say we will rule early next year, it will not change much on the ground. As I've said previously, the judicial activism has not changed, has not saved a single life.
What will it take to get there, and won't there be a pushback from certain quarters?
Well, the international legal order, the international relations system is not like a national legal system inside a country. There is no government, there is no central authority, there's nobody that can force another country to do anything. There is, of course, the moral dispute here. There is the exchange of ideas. There is the partisanship and the media and the public opinion. But other than a direct intervention with the presence of soldiers and of a mighty, of an impressive military force, which the countries in the region are not contemplating and do not want. There is nothing much we can do. We can only try and maybe mediate. This is what originally President Ramaphosa at the outset of this conflict had offered to do, to mediate. But then South Africa chose a different course of action and chose to accuse Israel in the biggest international legal forum, in the International Court of Justice. And this has actually closed the doors to South Africa to be able to try and work through persuasion on both sides and to, for instance, try to convince politicians that it would be to their advantage, it would be to a greater advantage to end the conflict than rather to continue it.
With all that history that you've just described, and of course, I mean, the role that South Africa has played in it, including the closing of doors, we are not suggesting that this exercise that they're going to embark upon today is futile.
Well, if we look at it from our perspective here in South Africa, where we have 5 million children suffering from chronic malnutrition and not getting access to proteins which will lead to stunting and which will handicap them for life, then it is questionable whether it was really a priority, whether it was really wise to throw several $1 million in costs at this initiative, which isn't being supported by any of our BRICS partners. This is very important. We are in the BRICS alliance. We have huge hopes for changing the world order into a better, into a multipolar order, where there's not an overwhelming unipolar United States. And we haven't been able to convince our BRICS partners to join us in this action. The only country that so far has joined South Africa before the court is Bolivia, and they are indeed very far away from it.
Professor Thomashausen, thank you very much for your time.